US President Donald Trump signaled over the weekend that he would pursue new tariffs on powerful computer chips that are used inside smartphones and laptops. This was a U-turn from just a couple of days ago when the Trump administration had excluded a variety of electronics from the steep import taxes that he had put on China. The push came as President Trump's top economic advisors have been scrambling to explain their shifting strategy. For weeks now, Trump's advisors insisted that they would shield no company or any industry from any of the tariffs that have been levied. All of this in a bid to reset America's trade relationships, particularly the one with China. The reprieve, though, for technology companies like Apple came in the form of a Customs and Border Protection rule that was issued late Friday night, which spared high-tech imports from reciprocal tariffs. While the US president paused a set of reciprocal tariffs on nearly 60 countries last week, his administration forged ahead with a new 145% tax on Chinese exports. The announcement last week came after Beijing retaliated against the United States. Beijing imposed a steep 125% retaliatory tariff on American imports, which sparked off Trump to announce tariffs as high as 145% on China. But in this game of who blinks first, Trump seems to be the one who has blinked first. The exclusions covered a wide slate of products like computers, smartphones, modems, flash drives. It was a big victory for companies like Apple, as well as other US tech giants who rely on Chinese factories for importing their devices. Apple executives had even been in touch with Trump administration officials about lowering the Chinese tariffs. Trump cast the exemptions in a slightly different light. He framed it as a temporary break while his government prepares more targeted import taxes. The Trump administration is expected to take the first step towards enacting these new tariffs as soon as this week, opening an investigation to determine the effects of semiconductor imports on national security. Trump is expected to use Clause 232 of the US Tariff Act to target semiconductor chips as part of America's broader national security framework. This approach mirrors the process that yielded Trump's tariffs on other specific products earlier this year. He had imposed high fees on foreign cars and foreign auto parts. Taking to social media, the US president signaled that the scope of his next inquiry would be on semiconductors. He would look at the entire electronics supply chain in what he called the upcoming national security tariff investigations.
The tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future.
But China is not sitting back silently either. China has suspended exports of a wide range of critical minerals, also known as rare earths. They've also threatened to choke off supplies to important automakers, aerospace manufacturers, semiconductor companies, and military contractors. Shipments of these rare earths, which are essential for assembling everything from cars to drones to robots to missiles, they've been halted across many Chinese ports. The Chinese government says it's in the process of drafting a new regulatory system. Once that is in place, the new system could then permanently end supplies of these rare earths from reaching certain American companies. The official crackdown is part of China's retaliation for President Trump's sharp increase in reciprocal tariffs that started on the 2nd of April. 90% of the world's rare earths are produced in China. Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary, said that Trump could announce these new tariffs on semiconductors in the next week or two. This would target not just semiconductors, but also pharmaceutical imports. That's another key priority for the Trump administration. Kevin Hassett, who is the director of White House National Economic Council, told CNN's State of the Union that it was always the case that some of these high-tech imports, like semiconductors, would be subject to their own tariffs, that is very much aside of the reciprocal tariffs.
The 232 things were always excluded. They weren't covered by the new actions that you discussed at the opening. And so it's not like, so for example, semiconductors are the key important part of a lot of defense equipment, and there's going to be a semiconductor 232 that studies those things carefully and decides what has to be onshored in order to protect America. And so it was always the case in Annex 2 in the Reciprocal Act that semiconductors were going to not be covered by that action because there's a 232 action that was announced in the executive order.
The Trump Trump administration has already excluded various types of semiconductors from the reciprocal tariffs, but the chaotic back and forth, the tariffs and then exemptions to the tariffs, this has completely bewildered businesses, many of whom depend on China for their trade. Some investors publicly praised the decision to walk back on the tariffs on electronics. In fact, electronics represent about a quarter of all of America's imports from China. The so-called heavy rare earth metals covered by the export suspension are used in magnets, which are essential for making many kinds of electric motors. These metals also go into chemicals that manufacture jet engines, lasers, car headlights, engine spark plugs. These rare metals are vital in making capacitors, which are key electrical components that go into the making of computer chips. Those computer chips are required for powering artificial intelligence and also powering your smartphone. One thing is clear, there appears to be no quick end to the trade conflict between the United States and China. And the potential for new tariffs on semiconductor chips is threatening to cast a pall on the major tech industry. There's been massive lobbying by groups that claim to represent Apple, Intel, Nvidia, as well as other US tech giants, have encouraged the Trump administration to strike trade deals with China. Ultimately, new taxes on semiconductor chip imports would make it expensive for American companies to produce smartphones, and that would cut into their profits or force them to raise prices for American consumers. An average iPhone, which costs around $1,000, could now go upwards of $1,500, which ultimately will pinch American wallets. American tech companies are hoping that Trump would finally pay heed to the American consumer.